Hello, thanks for joining us this morning. Just in the last few minutes, the energy regulator Ofgem has announced a rise in the cap on energy prices. The cap will go up by 0.2%. Now, this affects how much you pay for your energy bills every month, and the change means that companies can keep bills stubbornly high.
Mr. Speaker, I am asking everyone to make a contribution, but I can keep that contribution as low as possible because I will make further reforms to our tax system today to make it fairer and to ensure that the wealthiest contribute the most. I will increase the basic and higher rate of tax on property, savings and...
Will Reeves save us from the coming energy storm? The question every British family is asking right now. Welcome back to British Energy, the channel where British politics meets your pocket. If you are new here, do yourself a proper favor and subscribe right now. Hit that bell, because what we cover here is not fluff. It is the real machinery of power, money, and survival in modern Britain, and you cannot afford to miss it. Right, let us get into it. The Middle East is on fire. Missiles have been dropping, oil prices are trembling, and somewhere inside the Treasury, Chancellor Rachel Reeves is sitting at a desk staring at a set of scenarios that would make most people's blood run cold. The question is not whether this conflict touches British families. It already has. The question is how bad it gets, and whether the government is willing to open the checkbook again. One government source described the potential blowback from the Iran conflict as insanely profound. Another simply said, huge. And when two separate people inside government use language like that without any prompting, it tells you everything you need to know about the gravity of the moment we are in. So here's where we are. When the missiles started falling a fortnight ago, Reeves was deep in preparation for her spring statement. She had to abandon that work almost immediately and pivot to something far more urgent: plotting the economic consequences of a new war in the oil-rich Middle East. The spring statement she had been building became irrelevant before it even reached the printers. That is how fast this situation moved. She then did something rather telling. She asked her top official to set up what is being called an Iran response board. Ministers, advisors, senior Treasury civil servants, all sitting together, all working through what the government could do to shield the economy and British households from the worst of what might be coming in terms of oil prices and energy bills. Now stay with us here, because this is where it gets really interesting. And if you are finding this useful, this is exactly the kind of analysis British Energy brings you every single week. Subscribe if you haven't already. It genuinely helps the channel keep doing this work. The Treasury has already been nudging the competition authorities to keep a close eye on the energy industry. Ministers have already been in conversation with suppliers. There is specific help in the pipeline for people who rely on heating oil to warm their homes, and there has already been a very public dispute with the industry over ministers raising the prospect of price gouging and profiteering. All of this before the situation has even fully developed. Here is the uncomfortable irony sitting in the middle of all of this. For most households, energy bills are actually about to go down for at least 3 months because of a fall in the price cap. So right now, in this moment, bills are dropping. But the fear, and it is a real fear inside government, is that if oil prices stay elevated for a sustained period, that relief will be short-lived and the rebound could be painful. No one knows how long this war will last. No one can predict where oil prices settle. And that uncertainty is precisely what makes this so politically and economically treacherous. Now here is the historical context you need to understand why this matters so much. This country is still paying off Liz Truss's energy bailout from 4 years ago. That scheme, which capped household bills at £2,500 and offered 6 months of support to businesses, ended up costing £44 billion, according to the National Audit Office. Before that, the taxpayer-funded furlough, paying the wages of more than 10 million people during the pandemic, at a total gross cost of around £70 billion. The net cost, once you account for jobs and economic activity preserved, was closer to £25 billion. But still, these are staggering sums that are now weighing down the national balance sheet. And here is the political reality that Starmer and Reeves cannot escape. If the Conservatives, not traditionally a party inclined toward what you might call generous state intervention, wrote those checks, then a Labour government that has built its entire brand around supporting working people is in no position to stand back and do nothing if bills go through the roof. As one government source put it rather bluntly, if Truss and Kwarteng did it, then Starmer and Reeves will feel they need to as well. Starmer himself was explicit in the Commons this week. No matter the headwinds, supporting working people with the cost of living is always top of my mind. Reeves told the Times this weekend that the government is actively working through different scenarios. The Chancellor is not ruling anything out. But here is where it gets genuinely complicated, and where this government wants to do things differently to last time. In the rush of 2022, the Truss administration concluded it was simply too difficult to work out how to target support at those who needed it most, so they helped everyone. As one source described it with admirable bluntness, the Treasury paid for the richest man in the country and the poorest man in the country. This time, the government is reportedly looking at how to identify who suffers most and direct support specifically at them. Which sounds sensible in principle, except as a former number 10 official pointed out, it is not straightforward at all. There's no good, clear correlation between wealth and energy bills. An elderly person on a tiny income living alone in a drafty old family home might face an enormous heating bill. A larger family on a middle income living in a modern, well-insulated flat might face a fraction of that cost. The targeting problem is genuinely complex. Subscribe to British Energy because this is the kind of nuance that gets completely lost in the noise elsewhere, and we are committed to breaking it down properly for you every single time. There is also talk of looking at how to help small and medium-sized businesses that get hit hard by energy costs, not necessarily through direct cash, but possibly through policy adjustments that help them secure better deals or energy contracts. And there are voices within the debate pushing to strip some of the non-energy costs from household bills, things like contributions to grid upgrades. But doing that risks affecting long-term energy prices and is expected to face significant resistance. Ofgem will not make a decision about the next price cap until the end of May, so for now, the government is building contingency plans rather than committing to action. One source involved in the discussions described the current approach as deliberately measured. Rather than planning on putting anything in yet, they are creating contingency plans. Another acknowledged with some candor, it can't be the same as last time. But behind all of this planning sits something much larger. A question about the relationship between the British public and the British state that goes well beyond energy bills. When you speak to the people who made the big calls during the pandemic and the 2022 energy crisis, what strikes you is the weight those decisions still carry for them. A senior former official who worked closely with Rishi Sunak described the furlough calculation in stark terms. The alternative was millions of people losing their jobs in a matter of weeks, in a period when the government was simultaneously telling those same people to stay at home. There was no real choice. Another official described the experience of those decisions washing over them, acknowledging it was totally and utterly necessary and right at the time, but knowing the adjustment costs would be enormous. One former number 10 figure recalled watching Liz Truss out on the campaign trail talking about not offering handouts, while simultaneously being shown modeling of households earning £50,000 to £60,000 falling into fuel poverty. It was very clear something was going to have to be done. Pubs, independent businesses, services that make up the fabric of ordinary British life would have ceased to exist without intervention. And here is the observation that perhaps cuts deepest of all. One source involved in the furlough discussion said, the biggest thing was realizing the expectation of the state had been reset, that when a crisis came, people now expected government to stand behind them. And once that expectation is established, it is extraordinarily difficult to walk it back. As a former number 10 official put it, energy has become more expensive, but is it really up to the government to be liable for your bills? A ratchet only moves in one direction. If oil price spikes translate into big rises in household bills later this year, one government source predicts Starmer will face a choice between drawing on Treasury reserves, pressing energy companies for contributions via Ed Miliband, or some combination of both. As that same source put it, it is inconceivable to imagine a Labour government not helping people out. But what does that mean in the long run? What does it mean for public finances, for national debt, for the kind of country Britain is becoming, one where the state is expected to absorb an ever-growing share of economic risk on behalf of its citizens? Perhaps, as the politicians and officials who have been inside these decisions suggest, there needs to be an honest conversation with the British public about what they expect and what the country can sustainably provide. That conversation has not happened yet, but the pressure building around energy, conflict, and cost of living may eventually force it into the open. Take a breath. Stay informed, because the decisions being made right now in the Treasury and in number 10 will shape what your energy bill looks like in 6 months, and what kind of Britain we are living in long after this particular crisis passes. If you have watched this far, thank you. Genuinely. And if you are not yet subscribed to British Energy, now is the moment. Every video we make is built around giving you the clearest, most serious analysis of what is actually happening in British politics and how it affects your life. Subscribe, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and we will see you in the next one.